The diner was quiet that afternoon, with sunlight spilling across the tables and creating soft, warm patterns on the checkered floor. A few customers were scattered around, quietly sipping coffee or reading the newspaper. The smell of fresh pancakes and brewing coffee filled the air, giving the place a welcoming, calm feeling. The waitress moved gracefully between tables, her steps confident but gentle, carrying plates with ease and always offering a polite smile. She had worked here for years and knew most of the regulars by name. It was a slow day until the sound of a motorcycle engine roared outside, startling a couple of customers. A man wearing a heavy leather jacket and a chain around his neck pushed open the diner door, making it creak loudly. His boots thudded against the floor as he walked toward the counter. He looked rough, with a gruff expression that made people instinctively take a small step back. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on the waitress, a smirk appeared on his face. He didn't even bother greeting her politely. "Hey, girl," he said in a loud voice that carried across the diner. "Bring me a coffee and make it quick." The waitress maintained her composure. She had seen many rude customers over the years, and while some comments hurt, she had learned to keep her professionalism. "Of course, sir," she said calmly, moving toward the counter. She tried to stay polite, but she could feel the tension building. Other diners turned to look at the interaction, sensing something unpleasant was about to unfold. The man didn't just want coffee. As she set the cup in front of him, he sneered. "Don't spill it on me. You people never get it right, do you?" The words were sharp, and a few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The waitress took a deep breath, forcing herself to respond with kindness. "I'll be very careful, sir," she replied softly. She had learned that responding with anger often made things worse, especially when dealing with someone who was clearly looking to start trouble. The man laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "I bet you don't even know how to make a real coffee. Just like your kind, always messing things up." He leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. The waitress's hands were steady, her expression calm, but inside she felt a mix of anger and hurt. She had worked hard for her job and took pride in serving customers well. She hated being judged and insulted just because of the color of her skin. She glanced at a nearby customer for support, but they quickly looked away, unsure how to intervene. The diner was quiet except for the man's loud voice and the occasional clinking of dishes. What the man didn't notice was a man sitting a few tables behind him. He was casually dressed, keeping a low profile, sipping his coffee slowly. He had been enjoying the calm atmosphere, flipping through a magazine and occasionally glancing at the street outside. But now his attention was drawn to the interaction between the rude customer and the waitress. His eyes narrowed slightly as he observed the disrespectful behavior, his jaw tightening with quiet frustration. He didn't move yet, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. The biker wasn't done. He reached out, tapping the counter to get her attention again. "Hey, I said make it faster." "You're too slow." "Maybe you should stick to serving regulars like me. People like you never do anything right." His words were harsh, filled with contempt and ignorance. The waitress's face remained composed, but inside, a storm was brewing. She had been through situations like this before, but the constant judgment and insults never got easier. She leaned slightly toward him, keeping her voice steady. "I am doing my best, sir. Your coffee will be ready shortly." The man's smirk grew wider. He chuckled in a way that was meant to mock. "Your best isn't good enough. Honestly, I don't know why places like this even hire people like you. You're just useless." He laughed again, loud and obnoxious, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. Other diners started to shift in their seats, exchanging uneasy glances. The waitress felt their silent support, but it wasn't enough to counter the hostility. She had to remain professional, even when every instinct in her body wanted to shout back. She carried the man's plate to him, setting it down carefully, making sure everything was perfect. He grabbed a piece of toast and threw it onto the plate with a sneer. Finally, something done right. The man's arrogance seemed endless. He leaned over slightly, lowering his voice so that only the waitress could hear. "You know, I don't understand why people like you even try. It's hopeless. No matter what you do, you'll never be good enough." His words were meant to wound, but the waitress refused to react outwardly. She nodded politely, maintaining her calm exterior, though her heart pounded in frustration. As the exchange continued, the man laughed at his own comments. completely unaware of the eyes watching him from behind. The other man, still seated quietly at a nearby table, observed the scene with increasing concern. He noticed how composed the waitress remained despite the insults, and he could sense her frustration and the unfairness of the situation. His presence was quiet but attentive, ready to step in if needed. The biker finally leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms and feeling pleased with himself. He believed he had shown his dominance, thinking that everyone would simply accept his behavior. But the calm, observing man behind him didn't see things the same way. He sipped his coffee slowly, considering the best way to handle the situation without escalating it unnecessarily. Meanwhile, the waitress continued her duties with care, moving gracefully between tables and serving other customers as if nothing had happened. She didn't want the biker to ruin the atmosphere of the diner or disturb the peace for others. She carried plates and refilled coffee cups, all while keeping her composure. Her professionalism was remarkable, and it did not go unnoticed by those watching. The man in the leather jacket finally muttered something under his breath about the service being slow and the coffee being weak. He didn't notice the other man leaning slightly forward, his posture calm but commanding. The quiet observer's attention was focused entirely on the biker's behavior, noting every insult and every attempt to intimidate the waitress. The tension in the diner was thick, like a heavy blanket that pressed down on everyone. Some regulars exchanged worried glances, unsure if they should speak up or wait for someone else to act. The waitress felt the weight of the situation but refused to let it affect her service. She knew that reacting angrily could escalate things, and she wanted to handle it with dignity. At that moment, the biker laughed again, loudly enough that the sound echoed through the diner. He leaned back, stretching and smirking, proud of the discomfort he had caused. He had no idea that the quiet man observing from behind was someone famous, someone known for standing up against unfair treatment. The waitress, unaware of this fact, continued her work, determined not to let the rude customer ruin her day. The observer behind the biker shifted slightly in his seat, his eyes following the man's every movement. He could feel the injustice of the situation, and though he didn't act immediately, his presence alone created a subtle tension. The diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what might happen next. Customers were curious, their attention drawn to the interaction, sensing that something important was about to unfold. Even as the biker continued his rude behavior, the waitress remained a pillar of composure and professionalism. Her calmness in the face of insult demonstrated her strength and resilience. She had dealt with difficult people before, but this time felt different, as if the atmosphere itself was charged with anticipation. The diner seemed quieter, as though everyone was waiting to see how the situation would resolve. The sunlight streaming through the windows highlighted the waitress's determined expression. She moved with grace, carrying plates and refilling drinks, her focus unwavering despite the insults. The man in the leather jacket didn't realize that his behavior was being quietly observed by someone capable of making a difference. The tension continued to build, unnoticed by the biker, who remained oblivious to the presence of the famous figure behind him. As the part of the afternoon wore on, the biker finally took a bite of his meal, still muttering complaints under his breath. The waitress continued her duties, serving the other customers efficiently, her eyes occasionally flicking toward the man behind the biker. There was a silent understanding between the waitress and the observer, a connection that didn't require words. The observer's presence alone was reassuring, a quiet promise that justice could come without unnecessary confrontation. The diner, once peaceful, now held a charged energy. The biker, proud and arrogant, didn't realize that his actions were being witnessed by someone who valued respect and fairness. The waitress, graceful and composed, continued to serve, embodying dignity in the face of disrespect. The atmosphere was tense but expectant, as if everyone in the diner sensed that the next moments could change everything. The scene ended with the biker finishing his meal, still unaware of the eyes watching him from behind. The waitress breathed quietly, maintaining her professionalism, and the silent observer prepared himself for what might come next, ensuring that the dignity of the waitress would not go unnoticed or unprotected. The calm before the storm had set the stage for a moment that no one in the diner would soon forget. The diner had returned to a sort of quiet rhythm after the biker had settled into his seat and started eating, but the tension still lingered like a shadow in the air. The other customers were whispering quietly among themselves, glancing at the biker and then at the waitress as she moved from table to table. Each step she took was careful and measured, but the stiffness in her shoulders betrayed the strain she felt inside. She had dealt with difficult people before, but the sheer arrogance and rudeness of this man made her heart pound with both anger and frustration. The biker leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking as he watched her. He had a sense of superiority that seemed to fill the whole diner, and he wasn't shy about letting everyone around know he felt untouchable. His voice was loud, carrying across the room as he muttered about the slow service and how he couldn't believe people like her were allowed to work there. He didn't notice the way some of the other patrons were watching, their faces tense and unsure if they should intervene. The waitress, holding a plate of food in her hands, approached his table again.
"Here's your order, sir."
"I hope it's to your liking," she said, her voice steady, calm, and polite.
Inside, she felt a storm of emotions, but she refused to let them show.
She had trained herself to maintain professionalism in situations like this, knowing that any reaction could make things worse. The biker snorted, barely looking at the plate. Don't tell me you made it yourself. It probably tastes terrible. People like you can't do anything right, just like I thought. Typical." He laughed harshly, slapping the table in amusement at his own words. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. She wanted to shout, to tell him off, but she knew that wouldn't solve anything. She had to stay composed, to show strength through her calmness. She placed the plate down gently and stepped back, giving him space while keeping her gaze polite but firm. Meanwhile, the man sitting a few tables behind the biker was observing silently. His attention was sharp, every detail of the interaction etched into his mind. He noticed the waitress's professionalism, her patience under the weight of the biker's insults, and he felt a rising sense of respect and concern at the same time. He didn't want to escalate the situation unnecessarily, but he knew that he might need to act if the biker crossed a line further. There was a quiet intensity in his eyes, a calm that contrasted sharply with the biker's arrogance. The biker continued, not noticing the quiet presence behind him. "You know, I don't even get why people hire you. You're a joke. Everyone knows it. I could run this place better with one hand tied behind my back." His tone was mocking, meant to humiliate the waitress. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if speaking directly to her, but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. The waitress forced herself to breathe slowly, keeping her voice steady. "I'm doing my best, sir. I want all my customers to have a good experience. If there's something wrong, I'd be happy to fix it." She spoke politely, but there was a firmness in her words that hinted at her inner strength. The biker laughed again, almost cruelly. "Fix it? Ha! You can't fix incompetence. That's the problem with people like you. Always pretending to be capable, but you're not." He threw a piece of bread onto his plate, making it land haphazardly. "See? Even the bread is better than you." At this, a few other customers shifted in their seats uncomfortably. Whispers started circulating. "Can you believe him?" one woman murmured. "He's completely out of line." Another man shook his head quietly, muttering that he couldn't understand how someone could act so disrespectfully. Despite these reactions, no one intervened, either out of fear or because they weren't sure how to handle the situation. The waitress took a deep breath and stepped aside, giving the man space while attending to other tables. She moved gracefully, refilling coffee cups and clearing empty plates. Each movement was calm and deliberate, a contrast to the biker's loud and abrasive behavior. She stole a glance at the man behind the biker. He gave her a small nod of encouragement, a silent acknowledgement that he was watching and that she wasn't alone in this. The biker, meanwhile, seemed to grow bolder. He leaned toward her again, smirking. "I bet you're glad I'm the only customer right now. Otherwise, everyone would see what a disaster you are. People like you shouldn't even be in public." His words dripped with malice, meant to humiliate but also to assert power over the room. He had no idea that he was being quietly judged by someone who could easily put him in his place. The waitress, holding her tray with one hand, nodded politely. "I'm here to serve all customers, sir, and I always strive to do my best. I hope you enjoy your meal." She maintained a calm tone, though her mind raced with frustration. It wasn't just about the rude remarks. It was about the complete lack of respect, the assumption that she was somehow inferior because of who she was. The observer's gaze remained fixed. He watched carefully as the biker continued to spew insults. noting how the waitress handled each one with dignity. He could feel the tension building, the moment when the biker would inevitably push things too far. He remained calm, sipping his coffee slowly, thinking about the right way to intervene without escalating the situation. The biker, oblivious to the silent attention on him, laughed again. "I bet you're thinking I'm being mean, huh? Good, you should feel it. That's how the world works. People like you get treated this way. Can't expect any different." He leaned back in his chair, clearly proud of himself, and took a bite of his food. The waitress, meanwhile, continued serving other customers, moving with grace and focus. Her hands were steady, and her voice remained calm, but inside the tension was almost unbearable. She felt the weight of the biker's words, the unfairness of it all, but she refused to let it show. Her professionalism was her shield, and she wore it with quiet strength. Other diners were starting to notice the pattern, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others exchanging worried looks. A few whispered, hoping someone would step in, but no one wanted to confront the biker directly. The atmosphere in the diner was thick with tension, everyone waiting to see how the situation would resolve. The biker, feeling triumphant, leaned back further and continued to mutter under his breath. He didn't notice the quiet intensity of the man sitting behind him, someone who clearly had no intention of letting the waitress be treated unfairly. The observer's presence was calm but commanding, a silent warning to the biker that his behavior was not going unnoticed. The waitress, carrying another tray, caught the eye of the observer behind the biker. There was a subtle understanding between them, unspoken but clear. She felt a moment of reassurance, knowing that someone capable and watchful was ready to intervene if needed. It gave her a small sense of strength, allowing her to continue serving with her usual grace. The biker continued his tirade, oblivious to the fact that his arrogance and rudeness were being quietly challenged. He mocked the waitress further, making comments that were meant to belittle and intimidate. Each insult was a test, a way to see if she would lose her composure. But she remained steady, her professionalism unshaken, her calm demeanor a quiet counter to his aggression. The man behind the biker shifted slightly, his posture relaxed but alert. He could see the moment approaching when the biker would cross a line that could not be ignored. The tension in the diner was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Every diner seemed to hold their breath, sensing that something important was about to happen. The waitress, aware of the eyes of other customers and the quiet support from behind the biker, continued her work. She refilled coffee cups, cleared plates, and offered polite words to those around her. Her calm, measured movement stood in stark contrast to the biker's loud, brash behavior. She had learned that dignity often speaks louder than words, and in that moment, it was evident to everyone in the diner. As the afternoon wore on, the biker finally took another bite of his food, muttering complaints under his breath. He remained completely unaware of the attention he was receiving from the man behind him, someone who could easily change the course of events if the situation escalated. The waitress continued her duties, her calmness a shield against the storm of insults, and the quiet observer prepared himself, knowing that the moment to act might be approaching soon. The diner hummed with a mixture of nervous energy and quiet support, the tension stretching with every passing second. The waitress moved gracefully. The biker remained loud and arrogant, and the observer behind him stayed vigilant, ready for the right moment to ensure that respect and decency were upheld. The story of that afternoon was unfolding, every glance, every word, and every action building toward a turning point that no one present would soon forget. The diner felt tense, like the air itself had thickened with the weight of the biker's arrogance. He continued muttering complaints and insults, each one louder than the last, as if daring someone to respond. The waitress, holding a coffee pot in one hand and a tray in the other, moved carefully between tables, keeping her composure even though her heart was pounding. She had worked long enough to know that losing her cool would only feed the biker's sense of power. The man sitting a few tables behind the biker had been observing silently for some time, watching every expression, every gesture, and every word. His eyes were focused, but there was no rush, no abrupt movement, only quiet intensity. He recognized the tension building, the way the biker was pushing the waitress further and further, clearly enjoying the feeling of dominance. He knew that it would soon reach a tipping point. The biker leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice in a mock whisper, meant only for the waitress, though loud enough for a nearby customer to hear. "I can't understand why people like you are even allowed to serve others. It's funny, isn't it? You think you're capable, but you're not. You'll never be good enough." He smirked as if waiting for her reaction. The waitress met his gaze calmly, though inside she felt frustration and a burning need to defend herself. She took a slow breath, her hands steady as she responded in a soft but firm voice. "I am doing my best, sir, and I hope every customer can enjoy their meal. If there's anything wrong, I'm happy to make it right." Her words were simple, polite, yet carried a quiet strength. The biker laughed, a harsh, grating sound that drew the attention of several other customers. "Make it right? You can't even get the basics right. Look at this mess." He pointed at his plate as if it were a crime scene, even though the food was perfectly fine. Pathetic. He leaned back in his chair, clearly proud of his mockery, completely unaware of the man watching him from behind. The quiet man shifted slightly, lifting his cup of coffee and taking a slow sip. His eyes never left the biker, carefully observing his every movement. He could sense the growing tension, the way the waitress maintained her calm while everyone else in the diner was on edge. There was a certain satisfaction in seeing someone handle such insults with dignity, but he also knew that the situation might soon require intervention. The waitress continued her work, attending to other tables and keeping the diner running smoothly. Each step she took, each tray she carried was careful and precise. She avoided showing any sign of anger or frustration, knowing that the biker thrived on getting reactions. She stole occasional glances at the man behind him, and their eyes met briefly. There was a silent understanding in that gaze, a reassurance that she wasn't alone. The biker, oblivious to the presence behind him, leaned forward again. "I bet you think I'm impressed by your service." "Ha, don't make me laugh. You'll never get it right no matter what you do. Everyone knows it." He chuckled cruelly, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. The waitress's face remained composed. She placed a fresh cup of coffee on the counter for another customer, moving with grace and calm precision. "I am here to make sure every customer has a good experience," she said politely, her voice steady. "I take pride in my work and I always do my best." Her words were meant to assert her dignity without escalating the situation. The biker's smirk grew wider. He leaned back, folding his arms and speaking in a louder tone, making sure everyone could hear. "You know, I don't even get why this place hires people like you. No talent, no skill, just wasting everyone's time. You should be ashamed." The words were harsh, calculated, and meant to intimidate. The diner grew quiet. Other customers glanced at each other, uncertain of what to do. A few whispered under their breath, expressing disbelief and discomfort. The tension was palpable, every eye flicking toward the scene, sensing that the moment might soon escalate. The man behind the biker shifted slightly, leaning forward, but still calm. He could feel the right moment approaching. He knew the waitress was strong enough to handle herself, but no one deserved to be treated with such disrespect. He remained patient, biding his time, analyzing the biker's behavior, ready to act if needed. The biker, sensing the discomfort of the others, seemed to grow bolder. He leaned forward again, lowering his voice but still loud enough for the diner to hear. "I bet you're just happy I'm the only one here right now. Imagine if there were more people, they would all see how incompetent you are." Pathetic. His laughter echoed through the diner, sharp and cruel. The waitress continued serving, her movements steady and composed. She refilled coffee cups and cleared empty plates, each step deliberate and calm. Her focus was on maintaining professionalism, keeping the diner running smoothly despite the tense atmosphere. She stole another glance at the man behind the biker, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. It was a silent signal that he was watching and ready to act if necessary. The biker seemed to feel a sense of superiority, unaware of the silent presence behind him. He smirked and muttered another insult, laughing as if he had achieved victory. "People like you think you're tough, but you're not. You'll never be good enough. Everyone knows it. I could do this job better than you without even trying." He leaned back, clearly proud of himself, his arrogance filling the room. The waitress felt a surge of frustration, but refused to let it show. She moved to another table, serving customers and maintaining her composure. She focused on her work, letting her professionalism speak louder than the biker's insults. Every step, every word, Every action was a testament to her dignity and strength. The observer behind the biker remained calm but alert. He could sense the moment approaching when the biker would push too far, the moment when action would be necessary. He studied the biker's body language, his tone, and his expressions, preparing for the right intervention. The diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The biker, feeling triumphant, leaned forward again, speaking directly to the waitress. "You think I'm being mean, huh? Good. That's how the world works. People like you get treated like this. Can't expect any different." His words were meant to wound, to assert dominance, but they only reinforced the quiet strength of the waitress's resolve. The waitress continued her duties with calm precision. Her hands steady, her voice polite, her movements graceful. She had learned that dignity and patience were powerful, even in the face of cruelty. She maintained her composure, refusing to give the biker the satisfaction of seeing her react in anger. The man behind the biker shifted slightly, his gaze unwavering. He could feel the tension building, the anticipation of the turning point approaching. He knew that the situation might soon require intervention, that the biker's behavior could no longer be ignored. His presence alone, quiet and commanding, created a subtle pressure, a silent warning that disrespect would not go unnoticed. The biker, still unaware, continued to mutter complaints and insults. He laughed at his own words, clearly proud of the discomfort he was causing. But the diner, the other customers, and the quiet observer behind him were all watching closely, sensing that the moment of reckoning was near. The waitress, moving gracefully between tables, kept her focus on her work. She refilled coffee cups, cleared plates, and spoke politely to the customers around her. She had maintained her composure despite the biker's relentless insults, and her professionalism was clear to everyone present. The quiet observer behind the biker prepared himself, knowing that soon the biker would cross the line that could not be tolerated. The tension in the diner continued to rise, each second stretching longer than the last. The biker leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying his sense of superiority, unaware of the watchful eyes behind him. The waitress continued her work with calm strength, each movement deliberate and composed. The observer behind the biker remained patient, ready to step in if the situation escalated further. And then, with one final smirk and a harsh laugh, the biker made a comment that crossed the line completely. The diner went silent, the words hanging heavy in the air. The quiet observer shifted, his presence now fully commanding attention, his posture firm and steady. It was the moment when the situation would turn, when the tension would reach its peak, and when the diner would witness the beginning of change. The waitress, still calm, felt a surge of relief, knowing that the support she needed was finally present, and that the biker would no longer have free rein to insult and belittle. The diner was tense beyond anything it had felt that day. The air seemed thick, heavy with the weight of the biker's arrogance and the silent anticipation of everyone else present. The biker, leaning back in his chair, had reached the point where he felt untouchable. His smirk was wide and his laughter filled the room as he continued hurling insults at the waitress. He had no idea who was watching him, completely unaware that the calm man sitting behind him had been observing everything with careful attention. The waitress, still moving gracefully between tables, felt the weight of each insult, but her face remained calm, her movements precise. She took orders, refilled coffee cups, and cleared empty plates, all while keeping her voice polite and steady. Each glance toward the man behind the biker reassured her that she was not alone. The quiet observer had remained patient, letting the situation unfold while preparing to intervene at the right moment. The biker leaned forward again, sneering, "I can't believe they let people like you serve food. You should just stay home. Nobody wants to deal with your kind anyway." His words were sharp, cruel, and meant to humiliate. Some customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes wide with disbelief at the blatant disrespect. The quiet observer finally moved. He stood up slowly, deliberately, without making any sudden movements. His presence immediately drew attention. The biker, still laughing at his own arrogance, did not notice at first, but when he did, his smirk faltered slightly. The man behind him was tall and imposing, yet calm, with an unmistakable aura of authority. He walked toward the biker's table, not aggressively, but with a quiet firmness that made the biker freeze. "Excuse me," the man said in a steady voice, addressing the biker directly. "I've been listening to everything you've said. It's not acceptable to speak to someone like that. Everyone deserves respect and your behavior is not okay. There was no anger in his tone, only a firm assertion that the disrespect had gone too far. The biker's eyes widened. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded, trying to regain his sense of control. "Mind your own business," the man remained calm. "I am a customer here just like you, but I won't stay silent when I see someone being treated unfairly. You need to apologize and speak respectfully." His gaze was steady, unwavering, and the entire diner seemed to lean in, sensing the confrontation that had been building for so long. The biker stumbled over his words, caught off guard by the sudden challenge. He hadn't expected anyone to stand up to him, let alone someone who carried such a commanding presence. I didn't mean anything," he started, but his voice lacked conviction. The waitress took a small, cautious step closer, still calm but clearly relieved. She could finally see that she had support. Her voice was soft but strong. "Thank you for speaking up," she said to the man. She felt a wave of gratitude and relief wash over her. The biker looked even more flustered, realizing that the situation was no longer in his control. The observer continued, his tone steady and clear. "You may not understand it, but respect is not optional. You can't treat someone like they're less than you. It's wrong, and it needs to stop now." He didn't raise his voice or make any sudden moves. His calmness, combined with his firm words, created a presence that made the biker shrink slightly in his chair. Other customers in the diner began to react, some nodding in agreement, others murmuring quietly. The collective energy of the room shifted, and the biker's confidence began to crumble. He realized that everyone around him was no longer intimidated or willing to accept his behavior. His smirk faltered completely, and a flicker of embarrassment crossed his face. I didn't mean," the biker stammered, trying to regain some sense of control. But the words felt hollow even to him. He looked around the diner, realizing that he had lost the support he assumed he had. The people who had been quietly watching were now engaged, their expressions firm, not backing down. The observer's voice was calm, but authoritative. "It's time to recognize your mistakes and treat people with the respect they deserve. An apology is not just words. It's about taking responsibility for your actions." The biker swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the entire diner's attention on him. He was cornered not by anger, but by the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who stood for what was right. The biker finally mumbled a hesitant apology, though it was weak and lacking in sincerity. I'm sorry, okay?" He glanced at the waitress, who nodded politely but did not respond. Her calm composure sent a message. She had been wronged, but she would not engage in hostility. The apology, however minimal, marked the first acknowledgement of his behavior. The observer gave a slight nod, as if signaling that the immediate confrontation was resolved. "Apologies are a start," he said, "but actions and respect matter more. Remember that going forward." He returned to his seat, taking a slow sip of coffee, his presence having shifted the energy in the diner. The biker slumped in his chair, embarrassed and quiet, realizing that he had been put in his place without any physical confrontation or escalation. The waitress exhaled quietly, feeling the relief of the tension lifting. She continued her work, moving from table to table with grace, serving food and coffee, but now with a renewed sense of dignity. She had been insulted and tested, but the intervention had reminded her and everyone else present of the power of standing up against disrespect. Other customers began to relax, some offering small smiles to the waitress, expressing silent support and admiration for how she had handled herself. The atmosphere in the diner slowly returned to normal, the weight of tension gradually fading, replaced by a sense of justice and relief. People had witnessed an important lesson, that rudeness and cruelty could be met with calm authority and dignity. The biker, now quiet and subdued, avoided eye contact and kept to himself for the remainder of his meal. He had been humbled by the calm firmness of the observer, who had shown that respect was not negotiable. The biker's arrogance had been deflated, and he had no choice but to sit quietly, reflecting on his actions. The waitress, still composed, moved with the same grace as before, but there was a lightness to her movements now. She felt empowered, validated, and appreciated. The man who had intervened caught her eye once more, offering a small, reassuring smile. It was a moment of connection, an unspoken acknowledgement that she had not faced the insult alone. The diner returned to its usual rhythm, the clinking of dishes, the soft hum of conversation, and the smell of fresh food once again filling the room. The biker eventually left, his presence no longer dominating the space. The waitress continued her work, serving with care and kindness, her dignity intact. As the afternoon went on, whispers and quiet conversations among the customers shared the story of what had happened. The incident became a silent lesson on courage, respect, and the importance of standing up for others. The man who had intervened had not only defended the waitress but had also set an example of calm authority, showing that confrontation did not always require aggression. Sometimes, quiet firmness and presence were enough. The waitress cleaned tables and refilled coffee cups, a renewed sense of confidence in her step. She knew that she had handled the situation with strength and grace, and she felt a quiet pride. The diner, once tense and uncomfortable, was now filled with warmth, both from the sunlight streaming through the windows and from the supportive energy of the customers who had witnessed the moment. The observer finally finished his coffee and quietly left the diner, leaving behind a subtle sense of resolution. The waitress returned to her duties and life in the diner continued, but the memory of that confrontation lingered. It was a reminder that dignity, calm strength, and respect could overcome arrogance, rudeness, and cruelty. The afternoon ended with a sense of balance restored. The waitress had not only endured the insults but had also been supported in a way that reinforced the importance of standing up for what is right. The biker had been humbled, the observer had quietly ensured justice, and the diner had witnessed a moment that would not soon be forgotten. After the biker had left the diner, a calm settled over the room. The air no longer carried the tension that had made every movement and word feel weighted. Customers quietly returned to their meals, conversation softening and laughter returning in small, natural bursts. The waitress moved between tables with a renewed sense of energy. Her steps were still careful and precise, but there was a lightness now, a feeling of relief that she had endured the ordeal without losing her dignity. She glanced around the diner, noticing the quiet smiles and nods from customers who had witnessed the confrontation. Though no one spoke directly to her at first, the warmth in their eyes conveyed appreciation and respect. It was a small but meaningful acknowledgement, reminding her that she had not faced the biker's rudeness alone. The manager, who had been quietly observing from the back, approached her with a kind smile. "You handled that incredibly well," he said softly, his voice carrying both admiration and relief. "You stayed calm, professional, and strong. Not many people could do what you just did." The waitress felt a small wave of pride at his words. She had feared the confrontation would shake her, but instead, she had discovered an inner strength that surprised even herself. Meanwhile, a few tables away, the man who had intervened earlier quietly prepared to leave. He had ensured that respect and fairness were restored without any unnecessary escalation. As he stood to leave, he caught the waitress's eye. She offered a grateful smile, her lips curving gently in appreciation. He nodded slightly in return, acknowledging that her courage and professionalism had been the reason he had stepped in.